Ladies and gentlemen, they did it. Marin finally made the changes to the San Quentin that we've all been asking for since it was released 4 years ago in 2019. If you've watched many videos on this channel, you probably know that I used to own a San Quentin, but sadly ended up selling it due to 3 geometry issues that I just couldn't agree with. But today I'm super stoked because Marin's gone ahead and fixed 2 of those 3 flaws with their new 2023 San Quentin. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the history and design ethos of the San Quentin bike, as well as the Marin Bikes company as a whole. But if you're only here for the all-new 2023 San Quentin, that's just fine. I'm going to go ahead and include the timestamps in the description, so you can skip to that right now, and the rest of us will catch up with you shortly. Marin Bikes is located in and named after Marin County, which is pretty much hallowed ground for us mountain bikers. A lot of people believe that that was the first place where guys took their clapped out cruisers up the local fire roads and raced down them, giving way to the birth of mountain biking. And those early pioneers of our sport were doing it for the exact same reason that you and I go out on a ride today, for fun. And that also just happens to be Marin's slogan, made for fun. And I have to say, they really live up to that. I mean, just look at their list of sponsored riders. Everyone from their big name riders like Matt Jones and Martha Gill to their social media ambassadors like Owen Tim. They all just go out there and make having fun on a bike look really good. And to be honest, that brand ethos was one of the things that first steered me towards the San Quentin. I wanted to support a company that supported riders who were all about going out there and having fun on their bike. And speaking of having fun on a bike, I can't think of a more fun-focused type of mountain bike than the hardcore hardtail. So it's only fitting that Marin makes not just 1, but 2 aggressive hardtails. Their first of which being the Marin San Quentin, which was first released in 2019. There is a bit of a change in 2021. Essentially, they changed the frame colors and a bit of the spec that the bikes came with, but other than that, it was the same bike. The big change though just happened at the start of the month, and we're gonna be talking about that bike here in just a second. But going back to 2019, Marin made a really big point from the get-go that this bike was co-designed with none other than the Red Bull slopestyle rider, Matt Jones. If you've been sleeping under a rock for the last 5 years and haven't heard of Matt Jones, hopefully this B-roll that I'm gonna lay over gets you back up to speed. I'm not gonna lie that Matt Jones' endorsement of this bike was another big factor that swayed me towards purchasing it. As a fellow rider who focuses a lot on kind of the freestyle side of riding more so than the racing, I like the fact that this trail bike was designed by someone who also liked to play around and do tricks on their bike. But now is when the story of the San Quentin gets a little bit confusing, because there were a couple things on that bike, specifically the tall seat tube and the short stack, that I can't imagine a guy who spends the majority of his time on a dirt jumper choosing to put on his trail bike. Those 2 numbers made the bike feel a little bit more like an XC bike for someone who really wants to get down low and crank up hills, and less like a jib bike for somebody who wants to be manual around and bunny hopping off of every log in sight. The seat tube on my XL San Quentin that I owned was a whopping 515 millimeters long. And while that wasn't too much bigger than the other kind of aggressive hardtails that were on the market at the time, it really didn't age well. And by the time we got to the 2nd generation of San Quentins using that same frame, those high seat tubes really made this bike kind of unrelatable for a lot of people who are looking to get an aggressive hardtail. But that leads me to the newest generation of the San Quentin, and I am so happy that they changed that. And they didn't just change it a little bit, they changed it in a huge way. And let me start by saying that the thumbnail for this video was not clickbait. This really is one of the most radical hardtails I have ever seen. I feel like Marin just straight up did what at least me, and I know a lot of other people were thinking, and that is, if you have a hardtail with just a straight seat tube, no suspension linkage, no water bottle mounts, why not just make it super short and let people choose how low they want to run their seat? And that's exactly what they did. And it took a lot of balls to do that. Like I said a second ago, this bike looks very different than what a lot of us are used to when it comes to hardtail mountain bikes. It almost looks like a trials bike, which actually kind of makes sense given the fact that Marin just built a trials bike for Duncan Shaw, one of their team riders who's an insane trials rider. And I can definitely see that kind of trialsy influence in this frame. The first time I actually saw the bike on the website, I thought it was kind of interesting that they posted, you know, the size extra small or something because of how low slung that top tube looked. But no, that's how they all are. And if you can't tell, I'm really stoked about it. But enough with the looks, let's actually get into the numbers here. I'm gonna go ahead and rattle off some numbers here comparing the previous frame. Again, that's the one that was on the 1st and 2nd generation of the San Quentin, as well as a new frame. All of these numbers are going to be in size large. In that size large, the newest San Quentin has a reach of 470 millimeters. The previous generation has 464, so about the same. What's not the same, however, is the stack. The newer San Quentin has a stack of 631.5 centimeters, where the old one was 599.7. Those 30 extra millimeters are going to bump those bars up so that if you want to downsize a frame, like I do, you're not going to have to run a bajillion spacers on your stem to make it happen. The bottom bracket drop has been kept the same at 50 millimeters, as well as the chain stays. They're still 425 millimeters. Now for the biggest change though, the seat tube. The old San Quentin in a size large had a 475 millimeter seat tube. The new one, wait for it, has a 375 millimeter seat tube. The first time I saw that number of 375 millimeters, I honestly thought it was a typo, but it's not. I even reached out to Marin on Instagram just to confirm, and yep, they told me it's 375 millimeters. In addition to shortening that seat tube, they've also steepened it a little bit. The older San Quentin has a 75 degree seat tube, and the newer one has a 77 degree seat tube. That's gonna make the frame feel just a little bit more compact while pedaling, allowing riders to get a longer reach if they're looking for that more stable ride. One other kind of slightly misleading number is the head tube angle, which as listed on the complete bikes has gone from 65 degrees down to 64 degrees. But if you look at the frame, they still both say 65 degrees. The reason for that is that Marin has decided to now spec these bikes with a 140 millimeter fork instead of a 130 millimeter fork. And I think that's a great change. I don't think 140 millimeters and 64 degrees is too much to still make this be the ultimate dirt jumpers trail bike, but it's also going to make it that much more capable when you're taking it down super steep, gnarly stuff. I mentioned at the start of the video that there were 3 things that I wasn't super stoked on about that first generation San Quentin frame. Marin's addressed 2 of those, but the third sadly still remains. And that's the fact that the Marin San Quentin 1 frame comes with quick release dropouts. You get all the same dial geometry, everything else is literally the exact same, but they spec it with these weird 141 QR dropouts. And essentially what that does is it takes the San Quentin 1 as being literally the perfect bike for someone who wants to get into mountain biking and wants to get in it at a cheap price level and then upgrade it later on, to making it an essentially useless frame, because the frame's going to be a little more flexy in the back without having a through axle. And the bigger problem is that not many companies make high quality wheels in that QR 141 standard, and the adapters that are available on the market are a little sketch. I really hope that Marin does away with this trend of including those quick release dropouts on the low end frame soon, but until then, I would definitely recommend forking out the little bit of extra cash to get the San Quentin 2 over the San Quentin 1. Now that we've got those frame details out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about how Marin sells these bikes as completes. And that's the San Quentin 3, which breaks the bank at $19.99, the San Quentin 2, which is $14.99, and that San Quentin 1, which I talked about earlier, which I said maybe avoid because of those quick release dropouts. Well, it's less than $1,000. It's $999. And they also make 2 kids bikes. That's the San Quentin 24 and 20. And those 2 bikes look super cool for all the little shredders out there. I don't have a kid yet, but if Marin's still making these bikes another 5 years, I can guarantee you that my kid will be ripping around on one of them. For the sake of time though, I'm not going to talk about the spec on those 2 kids bikes, and instead just focus on those 3 for the rest of us grown-ups. So, starting things off at the front of the bike with the fork. The San Quentin 3 has the dialed Marzocchi Bomber Z2. To be honest, I think it could maybe do with like a Z1 or a little bit beefier fork, but the Z2 will definitely get the job done. I'm a little less stoked about the forks on the 2 lower tier models, but again, for the price that they're at, you really can't complain. Both of those are going to be running coil forks, which just make them a little less adjustable and a little bit heavier. The San Quentin 2 has the RockShox FS35 Silver, and the San Quentin 1 has the SR Suntour XCM34. Thankfully, neither of these are those scrawny little 32 millimeter stanchion forks. The RockShox is 35 and the Suntour is 34, so they should be plenty strong, just not very adjustable. Each bike comes with Marin's in-house 35 millimeter reach stem, as well as Marin's in-house bars. Moving on to wheels and tires, the Marin San Quentin 3 and 2 both come with Marin's in-house wheels, laced to some nice Shimano hubs. The San Quentin 1 just gets some in-house Marin hubs laced to those same rims. V Tire Co. is taking care of tires on all 3 bikes. The San Quentin 3 has the V Tire Co. Attack tires that are tubeless ready. Sadly, however, you're not going to get tubeless ready tires on the San Quentin 2 and 1. Those are coming with the Flow Snap tires, again, from V. As far as brakes, we've got 3 different brakes for 3 different models of bikes.
The San Quentin 1 has the 4-piston Shimano MT4100 brakes. These are going to be super dialed, and I think they should work just fine. San Quentin 2 and San Quentin 1 are another story. San Quentin 2 gets some 2-piston Shimano brakes that will probably get the job done, but might not be quite as powerful as you'd like. Whereas the San Quentin 1 actually has the exact same brakes that were spec'd on my San Quentin back in the day, which are the Tektro M275. I can tell you right now that those brakes are garbage. So that's stopping, but what about going? In terms of drivetrain, the San Quentin 3 has the Shimano Dior 12-speed drivetrain. While I've personally never ridden this, I've never heard anything bad about it. Everyone's raving about this drivetrain, so I'm sure it's dialed. The San Quentin 2 has the same Dior drivetrain, but the 11-speed version, again, should be pretty solid. And the San Quentin 1 is going to get the Microshift Advent setup. I've ridden the Advent X before, that's Microshift's 10-speed version, and it worked really well. Their 9-speed version is still a relatively wide gear range for only having 9 speeds, and most importantly to me, it includes a clutch, so you're not going to have to worry about the chain falling off all the time. The San Quentin 1 and 2 both get some in-house Marin cranks, whereas the San Quentin 3 gets the nice FSA Comet cranks. Last but not least, you guys know we wouldn't be talking about this bike if it didn't come with a dropper post, and thankfully, the Marin San Quentin 3 and 2 both do. The San Quentin 3 comes with the X-Fusion Manic post in 125 millimeters for the small and 150 millimeters for everything else, whereas the San Quentin 2 has those same sizes but with a Trans X dropper. That budget San Quentin 1 does not come with a dropper, but again, the bike's less than $1,000. One thing that I'm a little bummed about is that the complete bikes don't come with some longer travel dropper posts, so that means that if you want to maximize that super short seat tube, you would still need to run a quick release lever and manually adjust your dropper post, which would be kind of weird. Another slight bummer is that the seat tube on the frame fits a 30.9 millimeter seat post. I wish they would have bumped that up to 31.6 so that big guys like me could run like a 210 or even 240 millimeter dropper post and not worry about getting a lot of flex and sway and wearing down the bushings that are in the dropper post. But again, I'm not complaining. I'm just stoked that I can get on any one of these bikes and make it feel like a BMX bike, and everybody else can pick whatever size they want and not worry about having issues with having too short of an inseam. Looking at those 3 models of San Quentin, I have to say that the San Quentin 3, the most expensive one, probably is the best value. I honestly believe that you could take that bike on just about any trail you wanted to and not have to replace any parts on it. The tires and rims are both ready to be set up tubeless. It comes with a great dropper post, some really nice brakes, a 12-speed Dior drivetrain. There's nothing you'd have to change. In terms of the San Quentin 2 and the San Quentin 1, I do think that you would have to make some upgrades, specifically getting tubeless tires and better brakes to make them truly trail-capable bikes. And again, just a reminder that that San Quentin 1 frame is actually a little bit different than the 2 and 3 in that it's not standard boost spacing. It's essentially the quick release version of boost. I had a lot of fun putting this video together today, doing a deep dive at the Marin San Quentin, and hopefully you guys learned something and maybe you'll go out and purchase one yourself. I'm kind of thinking about doing these deep dive style videos into other mountain bikes, so if that's something that sounds interesting to you, just let me know in the comments. While you're down there, if you could hit the like and the subscribe button, that'll just help spread this video to more people so other people can learn about the new San Quentin. Once you've done that, go ahead and hop on your bike, whatever it is, head out on the trail, and hopefully I'll see you out there.